There is a particular moment you have probably witnessed, and it is worth slowing down. Something goes wrong in a room. A number comes in badly. A decision gets reversed. Somebody says the thing everyone was hoping would not be said. And you can watch the room change state. Not gradually, almost instantly. Shoulders lift, sentences speed up. Someone starts a sentence they have not finished planning. The temperature moves. Except for one person. Their voice does not change. The rate does not change. They ask a question, and it is an ordinary question at an ordinary pace, as though the last 90 seconds had not happened. And here is the strange part, the part this entire video is about. That person's calm does not settle the room. Not at first. It does the opposite. It makes people uneasy. There is a specific discomfort that comes off someone who is not reacting the way the situation seems to demand, and everyone in that room feels it without being able to name it. The usual explanation is that some people are just built that way. Low-strung, cold. They do not feel things the way the rest of us do. That explanation is almost exactly backwards, and it costs people enormously, because it turns calm into a personality trait you either got or did not, rather than a mechanism you can actually operate. Here is what is really happening. That person's nervous system fired. Their heart rate went up. The alarm went off exactly the way yours did, on roughly the same threshold, because that machinery is not optional, and it is not something you can talk out of running. The difference is not in the alarm, it is in what happened next. Calm, as it appears from the outside, is not the absence of a reaction. It is a delay between the reaction and the display, a latency. And latency is trainable in a way that temperament is not. Now, why does that unsettle people rather than reassure them? Because emotional states are contagious. That is not a metaphor. It is a measured phenomenon, and we will go through the research. In any group, affect spreads automatically, below awareness, and the group converges. Which means that when everyone in a room escalates together, that is the default behavior of the system working normally. The person who does not converge breaks the system. They become the fixed point everyone else is measured against, and being measured is uncomfortable. So the nervousness you cause is not something you are doing to anyone. It is what happens when you stop doing the thing they were expecting. We are going through 5 mechanisms. Each is a real lever with a documented effect. And in the middle there is a reversal that matters more than everything around it, because there are 2 completely different ways to produce the calm exterior this video is describing. From the outside, they are indistinguishable. Internally, they are opposites. One of them is close to free. The other quietly charges you for every use, and it is the one this entire genre normally sells. Let us start with why the room moves together in the first place. Start with a fact that sounds obvious, and turns out to have unusual consequences. Emotions spread between people, automatically, without anyone deciding to transmit or receive. Elaine Hatfield, John Cacioppo, and Richard Rapson, working through the early 1990s, described this as emotional contagion and proposed a mechanism for it. People automatically mimic the expressions, postures, and vocal patterns of those around them. That mimicry produces a small amount of the corresponding feeling in the mimic, and so states converge across a group, continuously, below the level of anyone's awareness. The chain is short and unglamorous. You see tension, your body reproduces a fraction of it, you feel a fraction of it, and now you are transmitting 2. 3 things follow, and each one reframes something you have experienced. The first is that a room does not contain a set of independent emotional states. It contains one state that everyone is contributing to and drawing from at the same time. When a meeting goes bad, it does not go bad for each person separately. It goes bad as a unit. The second is that transmission does not require the emotion to be expressed deliberately or even consciously felt. It runs on very small signals, a slightly clipped word, a shortened breath, a hand that stops moving. You are not choosing what you send, and the people around you are not choosing what they receive. The third is the one that matters here. Convergence is the default. The system's normal behavior is that everybody ends up in roughly the same state. So a person who fails to converge is not merely unusual. They are a violation of how the room expects itself to behave. And a violation demands explanation. Watch what happens inside the people who are escalating. They cannot read the calm person's state because there is nothing to read, so they generate one. He does not get it. He does not care. He knows something I do not. He is judging me. None of that came from the calm person. It came from the gap where a matching signal should have been, filled in by a nervous system that treats an unresolved social ambiguity as a threat. This is the entire mechanism behind the title. You are not intimidating anybody. You are declining to complete a pattern, and the incompletion is doing the work. There is a second effect stacked on top. In a group where everyone is escalating, there is no reference point. Everyone is moving, so nobody can tell how far. The moment one person holds still, the movement becomes visible, and every other person in the room can suddenly see their own state. That is often the actual source of the discomfort, not you. The measurement you accidentally provided, which raises the obvious question. If contagion is automatic and convergence is the default, how does anyone resist it? The answer is that they do not. Not in the way you would assume. The calm person catches the room's state exactly like everyone else does. Something else entirely is going on, and it happens in the fraction of a second between catching it and showing it. The advice given in this territory is almost always some version of stay calm, don't let it get to you, don't take it personally. Every one of those is aimed at the wrong target, and understanding why is what makes the rest of this video usable. They are aimed at the feeling. And the feeling is not the part you control. Threat processing in the brain does not wait for your assessment. Work on fear circuitry, notably by Joseph Ledoux and colleagues, described a fast subcortical route that reaches the amygdala before the slower cortical route has finished identifying what the stimulus even is. The system is built for speed over accuracy, because historically, the cost of a false alarm was trivial, and the cost of a missed threat was everything. So by the time you have consciously registered that this meeting is going badly, your body has already moved. Heart rate up, breathing shallower, muscles loaded. You did not authorize any of it, and you cannot cancel it by deciding to. This means the phrase, stay calm, describes something nobody has ever done. Nobody stays calm. Their alarm fires, exactly like yours. What varies is everything downstream of that. Think of it as latency, the interval between the internal event and any external sign of it. In most people, the two are nearly simultaneous. The alarm goes off and the face, voice, and hands report it immediately, because the default routing is direct. In the person who reads as unshakable, that interval is longer. Long enough that the initial surge has already begun to settle before anything reaches the surface. Nothing was suppressed and nothing was faked. The signal simply did not arrive at the display in time to be seen. This reframing has an immediate practical consequence. It moves the target from the sensation, which is involuntary, to the transmission, which is partly controllable. And it explains why calm feels impossible when you attempt it directly. You are trying to not feel something that has already happened. That is not difficult. It is unavailable. Meanwhile, the actual lever, the routing between the internal event and the visible one, goes untouched, because nobody told you that was the part that moves. It also explains a specific failure you will recognize. The moment you notice your own heart rate in a tense conversation, it gets worse. You detect the arousal, interpret the arousal as evidence that you are losing control, and that interpretation is itself a threat, which produces more arousal. The loop is self-feeding, and it is triggered by monitoring. So there are two things to solve. Lengthen the interval between the alarm and the display, and stop the second-order loop where noticing your own state amplifies it. Both are addressable. The first lever is physiological. It is the only one on this list that directly reaches the machinery, and it is the one that gets buried under the most nonsense. Almost everything about breathing in the self-improvement space is oversold. Set that aside, because underneath it, there is a genuinely mechanical effect worth knowing. Your heart rate is not constant across a breath. It rises during inhalation and falls during exhalation. This is respiratory sinus arrhythmia, and it is a well-documented feature of normal cardiovascular function, not a technique or a discovery. The mechanism, roughly, parasympathetic influence on the heart is reduced during inhalation and restored during exhalation. Breathe in. The brake comes off slightly and the rate rises. Breathe out. The brake reapplies and the rate falls, which produces something useful. If exhalation is where downregulation happens, then a breathing pattern where the exhale is longer than the inhale spends proportionally more time in the settling phase. That is the whole basis of every slow breathing protocol you have encountered, not mysticism. Arithmetic applied to a mechanism that is running anyway. Research on slow-paced breathing, typically around 6 breaths per minute, has found increases in heart rate variability and reductions in subjective arousal. The literature has real limitations. Effects vary considerably between individuals and studies, and much of it uses small samples. But the direction is consistent enough, and the intervention is free enough, that it is worth having. The practical version is unglamorous. Inhale for about 4 seconds, exhale for about 6. Through the nose if that is comfortable. No counting rituals, no special posture. 2 things make this different from generic breathing advice. First, the ratio is the active ingredient, not the depth. People instructed to breathe deeply often take large, fast breaths, which does the opposite of what they want. What matters is that the exhale is longer than the inhale. Second, and this is the part almost nobody does, use it before, not during. 60 to 90 seconds of paced breathing before you walk into the room does more than anything you can attempt once your heart rate is already at 110. Once the surge is underway, you are working against a system that has committed. Beforehand, you are setting the level it climbs from. There is one caution worth stating. For a minority of people, deliberately attending to their own breathing increases anxiety rather than reducing it, because the attention itself is threatening. If that is you, this lever is not for you, and there are 4 others in this video that do not require you to monitor your own body at all. That is the physiological lever, and it is the only one on this list that operates on the machinery directly. The next one does not touch your state at all. It operates entirely on the other person, and it is the most powerful thing in this video, which also makes it the easiest to misuse. If this is useful so far, take a second to subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel reach the people who need it, and it costs you nothing. In the 1970s, Edward Tronick and colleagues ran an experiment that is still difficult to watch. A mother and her infant interact normally, the ordinary back and forth of expressions and sounds. Then, on instruction, the mother stops. She keeps facing the child. She stays present, but her face goes still and unresponsive. The infant's reaction is immediate and escalating. First attempts to re-engage, the usual signals that have always worked. Then more effort, more insistence, bigger gestures, then distress and withdrawal. The still face paradigm demonstrated something important about how early social expectation works. What is relevant here is that the response is not to hostility. The mother did nothing aggressive. The distress came entirely from the absence of an expected response. Adults do not fully outgrow this. Consider what actually happens when someone escalates at you. Underneath the content, they are running a prediction. They expect a reaction, defensiveness, apology, counter-escalation, something. That expected reaction is the next move in a pattern they know. When it does not arrive, the pattern has nowhere to go, and the escalating person is left holding their own escalation, in a silence, with nothing to push against. This is why the non-response lands harder than any response could. Any reaction, however sharp, completes the exchange and gives them somewhere to go next. The absence of one leaves the loop open. The practical form is more specific than stay quiet. Most difficult messages contain 2 layers. There is factual content, a request, a deadline, a decision, and there is emotional content, the tone, the implication, the accusation carried underneath. The instinct is to answer both, and usually to answer the emotional layer first, because it is the part that stings. The move is to answer only the factual layer, completely and neutrally, and to leave the emotional layer entirely unaddressed. Not rebutted, not acknowledged, simply not picked up. Someone writes a long message with a real question buried inside a lot of implication. You answer the question. You do not answer the implication, and you do not signal that you noticed it. The effect is disproportionate, because the emotional layer was the actual message and it has been left standing in the open, unanswered, where its author can hear it. Now the boundary, because this technique has a dark version and it is worth being precise about where the line sits. Research on conflict in close relationships, particularly the long-running work of John Gottman, identified stonewalling, withdrawing from interaction and refusing engagement, as one of the more corrosive patterns in a relationship, not neutral, actively damaging over time. The distinction is what you are declining. Declining to escalate is a technique. You engage with the substance, at your own pace, and refuse only the invitation to match someone's state. Declining to engage is stonewalling. The substance goes unaddressed too, and the other person is left with no route to resolution at all. In a negotiation with a stranger, or a hostile exchange with someone acting in bad faith, the non-response is a legitimate and effective tool. Used on someone who is trying in good faith to resolve something with you, it is not calm. It is punishment with better manners, and everyone involved eventually works that out. That is the lever that operates on them. The next one is about what you do with the thing that gives you away faster than your face does. Of all the signals that leak under pressure, speed leaks first, and it leaks the most. When people are activated, a cluster of things accelerates together. Speech rate rises. Gestures get faster and smaller. The gap before answering shortens, often to nothing. Decisions get made faster and worse. None of this is chosen, and almost none of it is noticed by the person doing it, which is exactly why observers read it so easily. It is the most reliable available signal of internal state, and it is broadcasting continuously. So holding tempo constant while the other person's rises is one of the strongest things you can do, and it does not require you to feel anything in particular. Concretely, that means finishing a sentence at the pace you started it, even when the other person has begun theirs. Leaving your normal gap before answering rather than compressing it. Refusing to accelerate when the room signals urgency or when somebody looks at the clock. Nobody reads that person as slow. They read as deciding. Now, the part that explains why this works so much better than it should. Dolph Zillman's work on excitation transfer described how physiological arousal from one source persists and gets attributed to whatever comes next. Arousal decays slowly, and it carries no label. So the residue from one event gets absorbed into the interpretation of the following one, and the person experiencing it has no sense that any transfer occurred. Apply that to the escalating conversation. Someone arrives already activated, from traffic, from the previous meeting, from a message they read on the way in. That arousal is present and unlabeled. Then they encounter you, unhurried, not matching them. The arousal needs an explanation, and you are the most available one. So they experience their own leftover state as something you are causing. Their conviction that you are doing something to them is genuine. It is a real experience, produced by a misattribution they cannot detect from the inside. Which is worth understanding for two reasons. First, it means the accusation you sometimes get for staying calm, that you are being smug, or cold, or deliberately provoking, is not always bad faith. It can be an honest report of an internal state that is being misfiled. Second, it means the tempo lever is far more powerful than it looks, because it is not just declining to escalate, it is providing the target that unattached arousal lands on. Which is also the moment to be careful, because everything in this video so far can be performed. You can hold your tempo, hold your face, decline to respond, while internally running at full load. That is a real strategy. Plenty of people use it, and it has a specific, measurable price that almost nobody selling this material mentions. Everything up to now assumed a single thing called calm. There are two, and separating them changes the whole picture. James Gross's process model of emotion regulation distinguishes strategies by when they intervene. Suppression is late. The emotional response has fully developed, and you inhibit the outward expression of it. The feeling is entirely present. You are holding a lid on it. Reappraisal is early. You change how you interpret the situation before the response has fully formed. Different interpretation, different emotion, less to manage. From the outside, these are indistinguishable. Two people sit through the same hostile meeting with the same still face and the same even voice. One is holding a lid on, The other genuinely reassessed what the meeting meant and is not holding anything. Internally, they are opposites, and the research on this is unusually pointed. Here is the finding that makes the title of this video literally true. Emily Butler, Gross and colleagues, ran studies where pairs of people had a conversation, with one partner instructed to suppress their emotional expression. They measured cardiovascular responses in both. The suppressing person showed increased physiological activation, which you would expect, since holding something in is work. But so did their conversation partner. Blood pressure responses rose in the person who had not been given any instruction at all and did not know anything unusual was happening. Interacting with someone who was suppressing was physiologically costly for the other person. That is the promise of this video, measured in a laboratory. A composed, unreadable partner does produce a stress response in the person across from you. So it works. And now the bill. Suppression has been repeatedly associated with a set of costs. The physiological activation is yours, not just theirs. It has been linked in Gross's work and elsewhere with poorer memory for what happened during the interaction, which in a negotiation is not a small problem, since you are running a strategy that degrades your record of the thing you are negotiating. And it has been associated with reduced liking and connection, with suppressors reporting less closeness and their partners forming less favorable impressions. Reappraisal shows a very different profile, comparable or better outcomes on the emotional side, without the same physiological cost, without the memory impairment, and without the relational damage. Same exterior, completely different bill, which produces the reversal this whole video has been building toward. The calm that unsettles people is not the achievement. Suppression will get you there this afternoon. Sit still, hold your face, say nothing, and other people's blood pressure will genuinely rise. But it costs you every single time you use it, and the costs compound in exactly the places you were trying to protect: your recall of important conversations, your physiological load, your ability to be close to anyone. The version worth having produces the same exterior for free, and it does it by arriving with a different interpretation rather than a better lid. You do not hold the reaction in. You change what the event means, so there is a smaller reaction to hold. And there is a detail worth noticing here. Everyone can tell the difference eventually, even though nobody can tell it immediately. Held calm has a quality to it, a stillness that is doing work. Over a long meeting, or a long relationship, people register that something is being contained, even if they never identify what. So the practical question stops being how do I stay composed under pressure, and becomes how do I arrive at the situation already interpreting it differently. That is a real technique, with real research behind it, and it is the fourth lever. Reappraisal has an obvious problem. It takes time and cognitive resource, and the moment you need it most is the moment you have least of both. Attempting to reframe a situation while your heart rate is climbing and someone is talking at you is not realistic. The machinery you would use is the machinery already under load, so it has to be preloaded, done before, not during. 3 questions, decided in advance. They take about 2 minutes, and they are close to the whole technique. What is this event, actually? Not what does it feel like, what is it? A conversation where a decision gets made, a person delivering information you will not enjoy. Most high-stakes situations shrink noticeably under a plain description, because the size was coming from a story about what it means, rather than from the thing itself. What does the worst realistic outcome actually cost? Realistic, not catastrophic. Name it in specifics. The proposal is rejected and you spend 2 weeks on a different approach. Almost always the real cost is finite and survivable, and almost always the pre-existing sense of it was not attached to a number at all. What am I not defending here? This is the most useful of the 3. Most of the heat in a difficult exchange is not about the subject. It is about something adjacent that has attached itself. Your competence, your judgment, whether you were right. Deciding in advance that you are not defending your competence today, only discussing the timeline, removes most of the available fuel before anyone opens their mouth. Then there is a second, smaller technique for the moment itself, when the arousal has already started. Research associated with Matthew Lieberman and colleagues on affect labeling found that putting a feeling into words is associated with reduced amygdala response and with increased activity in prefrontal regions involved in regulation. The finding has been examined and debated, and the effects are not enormous, but the intervention is close to free. The practical form is a sentence to yourself, not out loud. This is anger, or this is the meeting going wrong feeling. What that does is convert an unlabeled state into an identified one. Recall from the previous segment that unlabeled arousal attaches itself to whatever is nearby and produces conviction that the other person caused it. Labeling interrupts that. The arousal stops being evidence about the room and becomes information about you. Note how different this is from suppression. You are not denying the state or hiding it. You are naming it, privately, which appears to reduce it. Suppression insists nothing is happening. Labeling says something is happening. I know what it is, and it does not require action. That is 4 levers. The 5th is not about the moment at all, and it is the one that separates people who are genuinely difficult to rattle from people who are performing it well. There is a thing people get wrong about calm individuals, and it is the same error running through this entire subject. You assume they do not spike. They spike. What differs is how long the spike lasts. Stress physiology is built around the assumption of a return. The response mobilizes. The situation resolves. The system comes back down. Robert Sapolsky's work on stress, including the long baboon field studies, made the point repeatedly that the acute response is not the problem. The problem is a response that does not switch off, and the damage associated with sustained elevation. So the meaningful variable is not peak height, it is recovery time. And this is where most people are worse than they realize, because recovery is invisible to the person doing it. You do not notice that you are still carrying the 11 o'clock meeting at 2 in the afternoon. You notice that the 2 o'clock conversation is annoying, and you conclude something about the 2 o'clock conversation. That is excitation transfer again, viewed from the inside, and it is why slow recovery is so expensive. It does not just extend one bad hour, it contaminates the interpretation of everything that follows. 2 practical consequences. The first is sleep, which is boring, and which nobody wants as the answer. Sleep deprivation is associated with increased emotional reactivity, including work by Matthew Walker and colleagues reporting greater amygdala response to negative stimuli in sleep-deprived participants alongside reduced prefrontal connectivity. Less regulation, stronger reaction. Which means the largest single determinant of how composed you are tomorrow may already be decided, and it is not a mindset. If you are consistently short on sleep, no technique in this video will make up the difference, because you are attempting regulation with the regulating equipment degraded. The second is the gap between events. Most people go from a difficult conversation directly into the next thing, carrying an unrecovered state into a situation that did not cause it. Even a few minutes, walking, paced breathing from segment 3, anything that is not more input, changes what you bring into the next room. And this is where the whole video closes on itself. Recall the reversal. The calm worth having is not held, it is arrived at. Recovery is the same principle at a longer time scale. The person who is genuinely hard to rattle is not gripping anything. They are simply not carrying 6 unfinished escalations from earlier in the day, which means the current one is starting from a much lower floor, which is the honest and slightly deflating conclusion. 4 of these levers can be used in your next conversation. The 5th mostly reflects how you have arranged the surrounding hours, and it may be doing more work than the other 4 combined. Pull it together, because these are not 5 separate tricks. They are one mechanism seen from 5 angles. Emotional states are contagious, and rooms converge by default, so the person who does not converge becomes the reference point everyone else is measured against. That measurement is the source of the discomfort, not anything you did. Nobody stays calm, because the alarm is not optional. What varies is the latency between the internal event and the visible one, and latency is trainable in a way that temperament is not. The exhale is the one lever that reaches the machinery directly. It works on ratio rather than depth, and it works best before rather than during. The non-response is the strongest lever available, Because an unanswered escalation has nowhere to go. Answer the factual layer completely and leave the emotional layer standing. Refuse to escalate, but never refuse to engage, because that stops being calm and becomes something else. Tempo leaks first and gives you away fastest, and holding it steady while somebody else accelerates provides the anchor their unattached arousal will attach itself to, which is why they sincerely believe you caused something you did not. And underneath all of it, the reversal. Two calms look identical from the outside. Suppression produces the effect this video promises, measurably, including the raised blood pressure in the person across from you. It also costs you your recall of the conversation, your own physiological load, and the closeness of the people you use it on. Reappraisal produces the same exterior with none of that, and it works by deciding what the event means before you walk in, rather than by holding a lid on afterwards. So the goal is not a better poker face. A poker face is the expensive version. The goal is to arrive already interpreting the situation differently, to recover fast enough that you are not carrying the last 4 rooms into this one, and to let the composure be a consequence of that, rather than a performance layered over the top. And when it unsettles people, which it will, remember what is actually happening. You are not doing anything to them. You have simply stopped completing a pattern they expected you to complete, and they are filling the gap themselves. Their nervousness was never about you. It was about the space where your reaction should have been. So tell me, which of these 5 is the one you are getting wrong? The breathing, the non-response, the tempo, the reappraisal, or the recovery? Put it in the comments. I read them, and the answers here are consistently more interesting than the video. And if this changed how you think about the rooms you walk into, do not stop here. The next video goes into what happens when the calm becomes automatic, and why that is both the goal and the thing to watch. Click, and keep going.